All right. Well, hello and welcome to another installment of Pop Poetry's interview series, Poets Go Pop. Today, I'm interviewing my friend, poet and educator Matt W. Miller about his incredible book, Tender the River, which I have right here. We're going to talk about, it's from Texas Review Press, and we're going to talk in particular about one poem called Real Life, in which the speaker discusses his real life relationship to the 2010 Mark Wahlberg-led film, The Fighter. Matt is the author of Tender the River and 3 previous collections of poetry, The Wounded for the Water from Salmon Poetry, Club Icarus from UNT Press, and Cameo Diner from Loom Press. He teaches English and coaches football at Phillips Exeter Academy. He also co-directs the Writers Workshop there. We got to know each other at the Sewanee Writers Conference several years back, and I'm just so grateful to know this super kind, super talented human. So thank you for coming today, Matt.
Well, thank you for having me, Caitlin. Really appreciate it. Love what you're doing with this.
Thank you. I'm trying to just dive into the work of living poets who are working with pop culture in one way or another. And, I started by thinking about one poem in particular of yours that had a really strong pop culture element. But the more I reread the book with an eye toward that, I saw it everywhere. And we've talked about a couple of other poems of yours that aren't in the book that really deal with pop culture too. So I'm really excited to talk to you about that. And one of my very first questions that I kind of keep thinking about is what it means for you to write a poem called Real Life as a poet, when poetry has this really kind of slippery relationship to the truth. The poem about the movie The Fighter is called Real Life. How does that get complicated for you when you're engaging this real movie that is a fictional representation of real people? Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. Even the I in a poem that I've written is a fiction. It's an artifice, and where reality and fiction kind of diverge. It's hard to nail down sometimes. So yeah, this is a fictional movie of a real town, of real people. This is a place, the town where the movie takes place, Lowell, Massachusetts, where I grew up. And I remember seeing the movie and I'm going, they nailed it as far as accents, attitudes, catching the neighborhood. They did a really great job at that.
That's great.
But they are fictionalized. That's the Mickey Ward who The Fighter's about, and his brother Mick. It's a version of them. It's a shadow of them. It's even I've seen Mickey around town. I have my vision of Mickey. Or you see ESPN has their vision of Mickey. His family has their vision of Mickey, and then
right.
This strange thing where he's a celebrity sports star, a minor celebrity sports star, but enough to get a movie made off him. But then the conflict where this comes together is the town is part of this story, and people I know are part of this story, or people's families are part of this story. And obviously there's a pun there, real life. I was trying to REEL life, because there's real life,
Yeah.
real life. And what I mean, I don't know, where do they even depart sometimes, and where we are always sort of measuring ourselves sometimes off of media and off of film. Like we love our stories to fit in these nice 90-minute boxes or these little scripted moments, and they never do. It's a lot messier than that. But we even like remember things in ways that are a little more scripted than they really happened.
Yeah. I think that's true. I think, your book deals so much with place and with history, and the location of the film is just as important as the people are, like you said. I would love for you, would you like to read Real Life for us, and then we can talk about it some more?
Sure.
That would be awesome.
Real Life for EW. In The Fighter, Wahlberg plays a welterweight from Lowell named Mickey Ward, and Mickey, one night sticking up for his crackhead half-brother Dickie, played by Christian Bale, gets his right hand busted by the cops, just like in real life. In the film, one of the cops is played by the real-life son of one of the cops, and he was, for his time, a cop in Lowell. I played football with him in high school. I can still see him all alone in the end zone after our tunnel vision QB threw to me again on a tight end drag for short yard gain. Great to see him play his dad, though I heard there were issues between them. And then to see him grin into the camera during those closing credit shots of the town and people. Hollywood had come to us to find a hero, and though I never met Mickey, I saw him once at the gym. A few years later, well after the cameras tided out of town after Bale had made his Oscar speech. Dickie got popped again for stealing and dealing. The cop I played ball with drove home one night, so ripped he never saw the SUV as he veered across Route 110 in Methuen. A man named Bryant Paula died instantly. The cop, the boy I knew, was arrested. He wept in court, asked to be punished, and went to jail. And none of this has anything to do with the movies, except that maybe everything has to do with the movies. As we run alone into an October end zone, arms flailing, hoping someone will see that we are more than our falling action, more than this soft light flickering against the dark.
Thank you. Gosh, I just love that poem. I'm kind of obsessed with those lines, and none of this has anything to do with the movies, except that maybe everything has to do with the movies. If we entertain the idea for a second that the speaker is right and that everything has to do with the movies, how do you interpret that? I mean, it's a very seductive thought.
I don't know how I interpret it. How do you interpret it? I just gotta you guys get to interpret it.
I think what the movies are when I read that, I think the movies are this humongous, larger than life part of our lives. They're a huge part of our life from childhood. They're a huge way that we see, if I never come to your part of the country, maybe the fighter is all I ever know of that town. And that's a huge part of our lives. And maybe it's right or it's wrong or it's accurate or inaccurate or unfair or fair, but it's happening. That moment of seeing into something else and you're not sure what's real.
Maybe it's, and I think just to build on what I said earlier, maybe it's a frustration that nothing is like the movies we want it to be. We want it to be this, we measure things against media, against TV shows, against, and we do it all the time, even more and more, like, against TikTok, against things like these Facebook pages and Twitter accounts like these, they're all crafted things. And it seems like this, that's the way it should be. That's how my life should be.
Yeah.
And that's maybe it's like, it's not really like the movies, but we kind of want it to be because we keep bouncing it off the idea of these media things that our lives are supposed to be this way. And they're never. Real life is not real life, but I think we want it to fit into that kind of box, But maybe it might just be me too, because I am just like a product. Maybe being a Gen Xer, I was raised on television and movies, that kind of latchkey generation where like you just like, yeah, movies, your babysitter, I don't have any. I've watched probably every Rock Hudson and Doris Day movie just because it was on TV and there's nothing on. I can't remember one plot of them. I'm like, those were always on.
I think because it is such a strong reference point, that's one reason I'm interested in the way that poets are portrayed, or poetry and poems in pop culture, because of that kind of stranglehold of this is how things are or should be or could be or can be, because there's not a lot of great models out there on film or on TV or in songs. The poet's a very kind of pitiable, sad, usually male figure,
I think of that. Remember that Sylvia Plath movie with Gwyneth Paltrow?
That is upcoming. That is coming in just a couple of weeks here. Yeah. Tell me about that film.
I mean, it's been 20 years since I saw it. I just remember my wife and I just balking at the line, but my girlfriend at the time, I tried to kill myself once. Just her delivery of these Plath lines. I'm like, this is my favorite. This is the poet that got me into poetry, Plath.
Yeah.
And I felt like, I don't know about the way if they're pulling this off right. And but you're right, the way poets are portrayed, because you're trying to make it sexy. So you get these you got Basketball Diaries, or you got the Rimbaud poem with also with Leo, and you got they're
everybody's dying. Yeah. If you write poetry, you will die. I mean,
the death sentence.
Something about that. You will suffer. Potentially die.
Good. Or Bukowski, was like that barfly idea, and I'm from Lowell, so I'm from Lowell, Massachusetts. Kerouac, he is, that thing, that fame that kind of destroyed him he had to live up to this character of this, this poet, writer, novelist ideal, and he kept having to stay up all night drinking with high school or 20-year-olds when he was 47, and killed them, And it killed his productivity, his shape of his art too. I think it just overtook him.
Yeah, I think, and I mean, how much of what his life was based on what his idea of what poets and poetry are. And I know that this is not maybe particular to poetry. I'm sure painters think about how painters are portrayed, or dancers are pissed off at Black Swan, and that's that's interesting too. But yeah, I think the poet is a really screwed up figure for me. And so when it crosses over, I like to engage real poets to sort of comment on it, because I comment on it every week. It's just me. And so I like to bring in other poets to ask them what they think about the poet on TV. And the cat just went inside of that basket and tipped it over. So unscripted cat shenanigans. Awesome.
Do you think you should have a much more exciting and and more endangered life to be a poet? I'm like, I should probably be doing something crazier than this, than teaching high school.
Yeah, you should have like joined the Merchant Marine and, you know, drank yourself to death. Probably that's what the culture is teaching us or something. You know, I think it's, you know, it's worth investigating why that stereotype exists. And so that's, you know, I'm glad you read that poem and, you know, thought about what real life is and what real life is for this boxer too.
What's funny in that poem, and this might not even come up in the thing, but like in the film, he's trained by a police officer whose also name is Mickey.
Okay, I've seen it. It's been a hot second since I've seen
the police officer is played by the actual police officer who trained him. He's a cop in Lowell. Like, they didn't get anyone who could kind of catch that character. So this guy's playing a fictionalized version of himself. You know, so that becomes like fiction within fiction within fiction. It's all kinds of, it's like, wow, it's like just bizarre.
It's just layers of, yeah, I mean, maybe it's because I've been spending so much time with middle schoolers trying to talk about what a speaker is in the last couple of weeks that I'm interested, you know, and it makes me think about how I continue to think about the I in my poems and the camera I that you are even when you're not yourself in a poem. I really love this poem so much. And I think also I first read it in the American Literary Review, where I used to be a managing editor. But it came in, I think, after my tenure there. And I kind of fell in love with another version of it that had a different ending. Can I like tease you about that or ask you about that? Or
yeah.
I really liked the other ending. Let me see if and I think they're both wonderful, but I'm wondering I think it's always really interesting to hear poets talk about how and why they edited something the way that they did, why they made a revision. I'm finding you on the interwebs. Here you are. The last two lines are a little different. I mean, there's probably other changes, but the thing that resonated with me was when you changed it to this kind of moment where it says, as we run alone into an October end zone, arms flailing, hoping someone will see that we couldn't be more open. And I love the double reading of open there in the sports sense. And, you know, that to me feels like an additional layer to the idea of real life, like being open, being read, being having films made about you. What can you tell me about that, if anything?
No, it's funny. You had mentioned that earlier, like you might ask this question. I was like, I changed it. Absolutely. It was like, then I went back and looked, I go, oh my God, I did change it. Like, and I'm like, what was going through my head? Why did I change this poem? And I'm like, and then I started thinking, like, I think I remember why. It was because this guy who's a police officer who killed somebody drunk driving, he got out of prison and started trying to rebuild his life. And without even talking to him, I'm like, okay, his life isn't over. When I wrote the poem, it seemed like it was over. Like, he was stuck in that place of being this little wide receiver in the end zone at night. You know, it's not about, it was his possibility had ended. His life was stuck in that moment of like this deed he did, you know, and that was it. It wasn't going to go anywhere. And I think this is a tough poem for me. This is a tough poem to even include in the book because I know this person, and my wife Emily is like, I can't believe you're putting it in there because, you know, this person, you know, but I was trying to do him service. Like, his life is not over. You did take a lot. I have to reckon. There has to be a reckoning for the life that was taken, but also this is not your fault. This is not the end of your story. It's not a falling axe and then oblivion. That doesn't have to be the climax of your life. And I think maybe that's where it came from, was the time, the context had changed a little bit around his story.
Yeah.
And it was less movie-like all of a sudden, because he has to go live his life after this. This could be the climax of a movie. He gets in the sax and goes to jail, and that's it. Or like, you know, roll credits. I'm like, well, no, there's post credits.
That's fascinating.
Live that life, and what's he going to do with that life? And I hopefully it's something, and it's been positive about like, continue not to let that be the only thing that defines him.
Yeah, I think that's super smart. I mean, poets do write final versions of things, like your book gets published and, this is it. But I mean, there's no like, well, you don't have out in the culture a first version of The Fighter. There's just the one.
Yeah.
And so poets have this chance over time, especially because of the speed that things work at in poetry, which is glacial, that, you'll publish something and a couple of years later, a book will come out and things happen. And so when you're dealing with real people, I think that's really interesting that you get a chance to kind of change your mind. I think modeling changing your mind is really important in this day and age.
Probably poets do that in readings where they just change a line or flip a word or two. Like Galway Kinnell used to do that. I remember, like, he's like, that's not the line. Where'd that line go? I was like, I don't feel like changing it.
That's awesome.
Maybe if I ever get selected, I'll change it back and I'll say for Caitlin.
Can't wait. If you will. And my continued apologies for the cat-based violence that continues to happen behind me. They heard the word The Fighter and now they're fighting. They're in the mood. They're in the mood to do it. So when I write on this Substack, I talk a lot about popular culture as being television, movies, music, that sort of a thing. And, the more I read, the more I read stuff like yours, I think there's more to pop culture than that. Like our board games are popular culture, aren't they? And I mean, what about, the popular athletic shoe? Is that something? Is that a part of it? Or, Diet Coke, is that part of it? The definition gets more and more slippery for me. And there's a lot of pop culture, I think, in your book. Where else does it influence your poems that you really feel strongly about? I'd love to hear you talk about and read another poem from Tender the River that you feel was influenced by popular culture, because I know there are several to choose from. I picked mine. You can pick yours.
What's yours? Looking through this.
Well, I initially picked The Fighter. I know that my daughter at 13 has several excellent pop culture intersections. If you like to go for that one.
Yeah, I would definitely look at that. And also, there's another one in there, Saving Throw, which is more about, it alludes to, its initial allusion is Dungeons and Dragons, which grows ever more, popular in some ways. Like,
yeah, it does.
Is there one that?
Yeah, I mean, would you like to read to my daughter at 13? I know it's a long one, but this is what we have. This is what we're here for, right?
This is one I finished the reading a couple weeks ago. This one because I knew it would stick the landing.
That's awesome.
So to my daughter at 13, and now that she's 16, she actually heard about this poem from someone did it in a class or something. She's like, "Hey Dad, let me see that poem." I'm like, and she didn't say anything after, but
nothing.
No, but if she was upset, she would have said something. She's like nodded.
I don't envy you your task.
So to my daughter, do you want to read it?
Could you? Yeah.
Sure. So there's a great poem by Lynn Melnick called 12, and it's in Poetry Magazine. I remember reading it. I just actually, I think, met Lynn not long before that, and I saw the name. I'll read this poem, and I was like, oh my God, this poem. And it's about, her talking to her 12-year-old, but reflecting on her own experience, which is vastly different than the experience of her daughter. So I'm like, that's a great idea. So I just copied it, and then I made it into a prose poem because it worked better for me. But hers is in couplets. So to my daughter at 13, after Lynn Melnick's 12. When I was your age, I loved a girl named. Can I start over again? Sorry.
Can.
To my daughter at 13, after Lynn Melnick's 12. When I was your age, I loved a girl named Jen. And when she had Becky asking me to come over that blue October afternoon to the house where she was babysitting, and I slammed hard to the street, bombing down a hill on my Jeff Phillips, one kryptonic wheel catching a stone, my elbow all road rash and blood. And when later I sat next to Jen on the couch, I think she expected me to kiss her, but I wasn't sure and didn't know how to be sure, so I played Don't Break the Ice with the kid she was sitting for. And wasn't I such a gentleman, a good boy, so terrified of a girl? Delaney, your dolls, your Leias, your Rays look dusty on your bedroom shelf. When I was your age, my G.I. Joes still posed, but I was scared to play with them in case Dad came home muttering, "He's weird," to Mom. So when I was your age, I made myself go outside to play football with my brother's friends. When I was your age, I stopped talking to Reggie about the X-Men on the bus, even though the fall of the mutants was upon us. When I was your age, I finally figured out how to punch a boy back hard enough he wouldn't ever hit me again before school on the blacktop as I leaned against the chain-linked fence that covered our backs from the knuckles and grabs of older boys. You tell me the cool girls are mean. You say you don't bother with them, but have you been in love, brought to balefire to another's glance? When I was your age, the girl I loved dumped me the night a ball went through Buckner's legs and the Sox would lose the series and she kissed Dave. Is a broken heart still a hurt all over the skin? Is this what you and Mom are whispering? You told me kids you know are kissing. When I was your age, some kids were getting laid, but I just wanted to be 7 again and forever Miss Q's class drawing pictures of Luke and R2. When I was your age, we started sneaking beers because we were supposed to start sneaking beers, but Delaney, be safe. Keep sitting on the den couch with us to argue and angle about what show we should all watch on a Friday night. Because when I was your age, Friday night was football games, showing off to the girls by getting bloody in games of Smear the Queer. Because when I was your age, gay was AIDS. And we were all too afraid to say anything but what we thought was the right thing. Oh, poor Reggie on the bus. When I was your age, the only good thing I ever did was stick up for him that one time, and Vula heard me and told him, and he said thank you. But mostly when I was 13, I was a coward like the rest. While you statue outside your school to protest gun violence. While you draw pictures where every woman is the right kind of beautiful. While you get yourself up in the blue-black dawn for a world you know will come at you with claws. While you laugh with your brother, talk to your mother. While you lean into me and let me give you the hug I didn't even know I needed.
Thank you so much for reading that. There's so much in that poem, and it really comes at you because of the prose poem form. It's really lovely. It's just sort of, it's almost like a photograph to me, like seeing all these things at once. And you even talk about that moment of pop culture engagement, like sitting on the couch and deciding what to watch, deciding what to plug into, what to be a part of. And you've also got sports, which are all over, these poems. I mean, does sports qualify as popular culture for you? What would you say?
I mean, it's the most popular culture thing in America, not always for the best reasons, but I think, it dominates so much of people's times, people's attention span, sports is why you can get a new bio lab at some big state university, because the football team or such and such a team is raking in millions of dollars of TV money. I had a poem in a couple of books by Club Icarus called Asante, and it was a poem to Asante Samuel, who was a cornerback for the Patriots, who dropped the ball in the Super Bowl they lost 2007, and that was about 2 weeks before my dad died. And I kept having a dream about that game, him dropping that ball, and for months and months having nightmares about it. And then finally I realized it wasn't about him dropping a ball, it was about my father dying, my brothers and I not being able to think about it. And as soon as I said that to my wife, I stopped having the nightmare. So that popular culture thing was just, I wrote it as a modeled after Ginsberg's America, just to kind of like, as a letter to him sort of thing, like. And it's really much like NFL, how's it get in your head and stuff, and how I gotta get away from all that a little bit and take care of my own son. I think sports is definitely, what's more popular in America than sports? It seems like it's everywhere.
Yeah, it's probably just, I know I watch sports. I'm not the most sports savvy, but it's probably just my own sort of shortcoming that it's not top of mind for me as a piece of popular culture. But I totally understand what you're saying. And I think that's interesting that your nightmare, I guess, of sports helped you kind of get out of your own head a little bit about what was happening, that it was kind of a template for something else. And I think maybe pop culture lets us do that. Like we sort of graft our stuff, our problems onto this thing that's external to us. And then maybe it helps us see it differently. I don't know. I think,
Like it gave me the time to kind of process this thing, and I could just like slowly come to this realization. It gives me a frame for it.
Yeah. It reminds me of that Seamus Heaney poem about scaffolding. When he says, that you can remove it later, feeling confident, that you've built something. But, a lot of things require scaffolding if we don't know that they do, even though we don't know that they do. So if it's, whether it's sports or it's Don't Break the Ice or anything like that, what would you say is your relationship to popular culture, just like more broadly? Do you find inspiration in popular culture frequently, or does it take a lot for something to kind of cross over into your work, or is it always just kind of right there for you, would you say?
I think it's kind of always right there. It's not a matter of crossing over. It's whether it's just like, oh, this is here, it's supposed to be here, and or using it to write something. Or, I mean, I think about my brothers, my cousins, and I could spend a whole day talking in just movie lines without ever once having words of thought, and just bounce it back and forth. And people say, oh, you're living in a fiction. And I'm like, well, sometimes there's I'm going to quote a movie
Yes. Do it.
And bring it. I'm going to bring it. It's going to bring sports and movies, and to bring it back to this is
Perfect.
that film City Slickers, Billy Crystal, came out about 30 years ago now. But there's the Helen Slater character is like kind of making fun of them for talking so much baseball, and Daniel Stern goes, yeah, I know it's his characters, I know it's silly, it's baseball, but when I was 18 and I couldn't talk to my dad about anything, we could talk about baseball. And when I was 18, I couldn't talk about my dad about anything. We could go to a movie and we'd have that, and we'd have parallel like play and talk, and we'd have some moments, so there'd be some commerce between us, some exchange of, it's like reading some of those Andre Dubus essays where like they just watch baseball, and it's like they're saying they love each other because they haven't given the language or the permission to have that language as men. Sometimes in this country, at least my generation hasn't given, like, okay, it's okay to talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what my daughter and I, a teenager, can be tough, but like, hey, want to go see Endgame? Yeah, let's go do that. All right. And then we have that moment we can talk after, or we get excited about seeing the next episode of Loki or something. And it's just, it can be the thing that when we are having trouble, it can be the thing that keeps the beacons lit. That's a Lord of the Rings reference.
Man, you don't miss a chance. That's amazing. I think that's so important. And that's why it makes me, and it's always made me so baffled that there was ever any kind of distinction in some ways between high culture and low culture, popular culture. I don't know. It's culture. I mean, what is more intimate than something that allows you to create a language with somebody else, even if, you're not directly accessing, the subject at hand, you are having a shared experience through Marvel movies or whatever, or through the Lord of the Rings. I think that's really interesting. Now you just got me thinking about Marvel movies and my obsession with Martin Scorsese's hatred of Marvel movies, which I think is really, really misplaced. And I can't stop thinking about it. That feels like a poet sort of saying, well, take this reference to Game of Thrones out of your poem,
that's so huge to it.
Yeah, I think it's, it's also a great way to get young people, like you said, connecting with young people. It's a great way to let them know that, I think young writers start out and they think, well, I need to write about elevated subjects like the nature of life and love and death and sadness. And they don't think that the stuff right in front of them has any meaning, or that it doesn't fit in poetry. They can't, if they're enjoying Loki, cool, but keep that out of your English classroom. And I don't know that that's always a good approach to draw that line,
It would be tough for me to draw that line because I don't do a very good job of drawing that line myself. And the moment you start talking about like, well, these things should be bringing up topics of death, I just go to the sword teacher in Game of Thrones, says, there is only one God, his name is death. And what do we say to God? Not today.
Yeah, I mean, it occupies a lot of our cultural imagination. And you can take one track and say, that's sad, that's a tragedy, we have no imagination. Or you can look deeper at it, I think, and try to lean into it and see what happens. And that's sort of the camp that I'm in. And you, please.
Do the Henry ad, and walk it through with Godfather. I mean, like what's, these family and these things, these life we've chosen, the War of the Roses, and like, and Scorsese, like
Yep.
these family problems in these quest for empire. But
Yeah.
yeah, Scorsese doesn't like that. Maybe he's also I'm not gonna lie, he's kind of lost his fastball there a little bit with the. Yeah. I mean, The Departed was not as good as Goodfellas, but they got all the awards.
No, that's like maybe the nicest light insult I've heard. Lost his fastball a little bit. I think that's true. Yeah, I don't know, maybe it's also because I do teach and I do interact with younger people and I see what popular culture means to them. I mean, it means a lot to me, I'm not gonna lie. I watch a lot of TV, but I read a lot of books. They are working on the book reading and they watch a lot of TV. And so being close to them and seeing what it means to them, as a teacher, I think has kept me less skeptical of popular culture. But also as a teacher of poetry, I'm aware of the stereotype of the teacher of poetry, which is also something that exists on film. And I was looking for some photos for our article for this video, and I came across a really outstanding photo of you that's going to be accompanying this that has a lot of Robin Williams and Dead Poets Society vibes. And yeah. Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society is like the go-to touchstone for are you a poetry teacher? I don't know what's ever going to supersede it. We'll see. I think it's a really trenchant sort of meme of poetry teacherdom. How do you personally feel about that portrayal of teaching poetry?
Man, I tell you, that came out my freshman year of high school, and it was just like, yeah, man. Like when you're so sort of get excited, I just started scratching down some poems for the first time, and it seemed like a weird thing to do, and you kind of like you fall in love with it. And that idea that speech he makes about science, engineering, these things are important. They sustain life on this planet, but art, music, poetry, this is what we stay alive for. And I never let go of that idea. Yeah. I mean, there is a romanticized vision of that, what happens in that place. I mean, I teach at a private boarding school. My vision of it was that place.
I mean, what else would you have seen, in that year? Yeah.
It reminds me of like Tobias Wolff talking about when he wrote Bullet in the Brain. You ever read that story?
I haven't, but I'm aware of it.
There's a book critic in his bank and he's getting robbed, and he starts laughing at the way they're robbing it because they're speaking in cliches. But he was like, Toby was saying, I started thinking like, where would you learn how to rob a bank? From television, from movies, from like reading Hemingway, or from like watching some '60s show. And when the guy says capiche, the book critic laughs and he gets shot in the head, and the rest of the book is the bullet traveling through the brain. It's brilliant story, but like a lot of this stuff
I read this
from received images. Yeah, I got the Exeter Academy, and I'm like, all right, this is going to be just like
yeah.
Oh, Captain
Poet Society.
What is something about why is it in teachers in high school movies only have one class?
That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be lovely?
We all have 4 or 5 classes to teach. We don't have time. Like, I'm gonna go spend some time on the pitch throwing soccer balls, as well as teach this class and go to my kids.
Show up about 11 a.m. for your English class.
Yeah.
Yep. So, full soccer. Head home.
I love that. It's kind of hard to not dislike that performance. Robin Williams. It's kind of beautiful and sweet. And it's simplified in some ways, but it also it's true at the same time. I think.
Yeah, I rewatched it recently. It had been a while, and I was just I was in my feelings a little bit. It's there's something to it there, but it does have that that really romanticized let's go out and cover ourselves in leaves and just absolutely lose our minds element of poetry. Like, let's go fully back to nature, that kind of thing.
Start banging some drums.
Yeah, they're in a cave. They literally go into a cave and start dancing, and that's where it started. So I guess that makes sense. But I if you learned what Exeter was going to be like for you, in your mind, you prepared yourself for that from the movie. That's why I wonder about what students think poetry is, but they're like, oh, that's what poetry is.
Yeah.
It's beating drums and smearing dirt all over yourself, and which is kind of great. It's kind of great. I think there are a lot worse portrayals of poets and poetry, and like the sort of beat stereotype, like cigarette smoking, bongo playing, sunglass wearing,
which is just a creation by Time magazine. It wasn't even what most of those guys are doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
You say about that all in that movie, that part, it all starts in the cave, standing around a fire. But I mean, what is going to the movies but being in a cave looking at a fire? I mean, a story, someone's telling a story, it's just they're not live, and just like getting excited by that in the dark with others, you know, in some ways.
Yeah.
Sort of does, it is where it started.
That's extremely well put. Absolutely.
Or Mr. Plato's cave, and we're all just looking at shadows of reality, but.
Yeah. Or a shadow of a shadow. We're like incepting ourselves with pop culture inside poetry, inside a movie. I wanted to know, I'm asking everyone this question so I can amass a library. And because I just genuinely like to know, is there a favorite poem or poet that you have that pops up in popular culture? Is there a representation of poetry or a poem that you like that's in a song or a movie or anything? And you know, what's exciting about that for you? That one that you think of?
A few came up when I was thinking about this. Ozymandias in Breaking Bad.
Yes.
And some stuff from. There's a great pop song, which maybe not a great song, but from the Dead. I think who is it? It's a Canadian band. I just blanked on it, but they take the T.S. Eliot's love song of Proof Rock.
Oh.
And they kind of redo it. I just forgot.
If only we had a machine that had all knowledge right at our fingertips.
Oh man, I know. I'm looking it up. What the heck was that?
I could see Proof Rock. Was it like a rock band?
Yeah. I'm sorry about this.
I looked up your poem. We live in a society. It's okay.
I can hear the song, but I can't get the title in my head. All I can see is Proof Rock.
Don't make me make you sing it, because then that'll be immortalized on the interwebs.
Every time I wrote T.S. Eliot song, it goes to the love song of Jeff or Proof Rock. Canadian band from the 90s.
Oh, the 90s edition.
Afternoons and Coffee Spoons by Crash Test Dummies.
Oh, the Crash Test Dummies! Afternoons and Coffee Spoons.
Yep.
Sick. So, were you aware of the poem prior to hearing it?
It was not.
So the song taught you the poem?
Yeah. I figured it out later, like years later, like, that was.
Oh, years later.
I didn't know anything about poetry. You know, I went to. You can get by my high school without doing too much work. It was so you just kind of read your own stuff. So I didn't really know a ton. I had big gaps. But I tell you what, my favorite poem, probably in read by somebody in a movie, and this is terrible, but it's Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield.
Oh, okay. What is it?
Into That Good Night.
Dylan, it's been a long time since
I was 12 years old. It was the first time I had heard it. I just found out a friend of mine had leukemia, and really stood out for me. It was the end of the movie. It's also the first time I heard Joyce read, because his English teacher reads Joyce out loud, reads the last 100 words.
To Netflix queue or whatever. I think John really loves Back to School. So yeah. First time you'd heard Joyce read aloud, and also Dylan Thomas.
Yeah, and it's like in a final exam, and Dangerfield's asked to read that poem, and he reads it, and the teacher goes, "Now, what does that poem mean to you?" And he says, "It means I don't take shit from nobody. I'm going to pass this test." And I'm like, but the way he read it, "And you, my father, upon the hill," I'm like, oh my God, it's like really, you could see him getting it, the poem, as an actor, and going, oh my God, he's getting the poem.
Oh my God, that sounds incredible. Okay, well, that's going to have to be upcoming.
I definitely show it to my kids when I teach them that poem.
Do you? Okay.
You're going to watch Rodney's version first before along with these other versions of people. Yeah, we got, all these fancy people reading it, and Dylan Thomas reading it.
That poem is so, it's an institution, right? It's just, and the first time they hear it is Rodney Dangerfield in your class?
No, I give them a few versions of it first.
Because I think you could do that and it would still be amazing. That's a great idea. I love that. Thank you for telling me about that and reminding me. Man, what a voice.
And I know there are more in media, but I'm blanking to them.
No, it's so many. It's so many. And even when I think of all that I can think of, there are more. And I have a huge nerdy spreadsheet. It's a lot. And I'm going to be adding Rodney Dangerfield to that.
Hollow Men and Apocalypse Now in the
the Hollow Man. Why is the answer to why is everything Elliot is because that's the education system. That was, at least.
Yeah, and that
Elliot, Pound, Joyce, modernists.
Filmmakers were getting it when they were in high school, and they brought it to, in college in the 60s. They brought it to the film in the 60s and 70s. So,
which is why, okay, fine, but times have changed.
Right.
Can we get different poems into the culture? Like Maggie Smith on Madam Secretary blew my mind, and maybe I'll never stop being blown away by it. Having a living poet have their work, on TV, because otherwise it is just Dylan Thomas, for all time.
Yeah. No, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, oh man, this is all these old white guys, and I'm like, where are newer poets or poets of, different backgrounds, different voices, different countries, nationalities, genders, ethnicities, sexualities, where you don't get them as much. So
no, I mean, it's something that we definitely need more of. Let me ask you, if you could have, well, I just wrote about The Green Knight recently. The Green Knight.
I saw that. It was awesome.
I'm really excited about that. I thought it was really interesting and well done, really challenging.
You said really good, because I was going to teach that in the winter or spring to it's on our book list.
Oh, cool.
I was going to do it anyway, and I heard the movie's coming out. I wasn't sure when it was coming out. I'm like,
yeah.
So cool that
now there's a tie-in text, and the Bernard O'Donoghue translation's pretty clean and kind of nice, I think, readable, maybe for students. And then, but like Dev Patel's on the cover.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really cool thing especially if you're a young person, like, it's a movie. Usually you get like crappy novelizations, but this is just a really great translation that the director of the film has sort of signed off on, which is interesting. Are there things that you would like to see? Like, if you could see a mashup creatively between some writers that you like and some pop culture that you like, can you think of anything that you would like to see in that respect? If you could snap your fingers and make it a reality? Like, who would pop up on your TV show, or who would, like, your Marvel villain start quoting in some moment of anguish?
Oh, that's great. Geez, looking around the room here.
Just a casual, unscripted question to put you off your game. Like, the new Ghostbusters movie is coming out, right? With Paul Rudd and I don't know who else.
Does it matter?
It doesn't matter. It's a Ghostbusters movie. It's fine. Like,
they squashed the women's Ghostbuster with this one, don't they?
Yeah, I could talk a lot about that. I feel like this is like trying to erase history a little bit, That
was another one my daughter and I really enjoyed going to see. It was the female-led Ghostbusters.
I thought it was good. I enjoyed it. It's
really the extended cut too. Opened up some of the gaps in it.
Oh, I haven't seen that. I'll have to see that.
Really, like, oh, that makes a little more sense now. Why didn't they include that? But they cut it down to 95 so they can sell more.
That's what happens. That is what happens. Like, would it be? I don't know. This is not a great example, but like, I don't know. Would it be cool to have one of the Ghostbusters talk about some spooky thing, or to like quote Edgar Allan Poe, or to quote, something creepy? Who else could we have for that? Or, if there's I would love for Diane Seuss's poetry to appear anywhere and everywhere all of the time, on the side of a bus, inside of a TV show, whatever. I think she has these really sort of evocative, sexy, violent, almost poems that are really splashy and beautiful. And I feel like it would be really badass to have that, I don't know, like on American Horror Story or something. I watch a lot of horror. I'm playing my hand.
Paul Rudd doing like Sharon Olds or something, some Ada Limon or something like that. A little, something.
That would be cool.
like out of nowhere, and pulling it off. Not it being a funny thing, but
no, like just stone cold.
Like that was
reciting it.
Those are the lines that need to be said right now.
Yeah.
Well, let's go get these ghosts.
Or I'm wondering too, like, I don't know, is it possible? I mean, the Green Knight movie is based on Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which is a very, very narrative poem, and it's sort of easy to adapt because some very linear things happen, and you can't just adapt any book of poetry in that way. I think it would be more of like a dreamy type of film, but it's interesting to think about, what other ways could poetry be integrated, with popular culture. I try to think about what's next. There's such a huge catalog of stuff that I have that's already happened, and I'm thinking about what's next, what's happening going forward. I'm wondering.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think I was listening to your interview with Jenny Moberg, and like poetry should be pop culture. Not only should it just reference it. And I thought that was great. And how do you do that? I don't know. And I think taking it out of this rarefied space of like it's up there on the pedestal.
Yeah.
Don't touch it, kids. Don't touch it. Don't take it. Don't break it. That's which, and then it just collects. So it just collects dust. So how do we get it into the vernacular now, and have and I hate to use the word currency now because then it's a monetized thing, which is one of the great things about poetry. It's less monetized, but it'd be nice,
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be such an extreme.
Yeah, there's definitely, the argument is there that I've tried to talk about and I think about a lot, but that you don't want to, like you said, monetize it. You don't. When you do get into the realm of popular culture and you're talking about $1 billion made by a Marvel movie, and that's a really different political space too. And so poetry has done well in some ways to be away from that. So it's something to think about for sure. I'm not sure, what's going to be next or what else I'm going to find in popular culture and poetry, but do you have any other projects in the works, or what's next for you creatively? Is there anything you're working on?
I want to go back to how the pop culture. I had an idea.
Yeah, let's do it.
Actually, not an idea. Paul Marion, who's a poet I know from Lowell, Massachusetts, he actually had this idea. We wrote like spitballing a few years ago, and I just thought of it like a TV series, not unlike you've written about Friends or like Cheers, but it's called Open Mic. Copyright, Open Mic. Like an interview, because that you've been to open mics, right?
But tell me it's not like Open MIKE and the guy's name is Mike.
No. It's just like it's just a gathering every week. You have the same sort of like cast of characters who go to do their open mic poetry, and they're kind of they're from walks of life, and like, but maybe there's some good poetry gets thrown in there too, and the strange.
But it's about like a group of people who like do this and run this and have this event, and it happens on the show. Oh my God.
The open mic every week.
I would watch that.
Yeah, it'd be fun because you're watching yourself and you're like, oh, it's kind of me. I kind of do that a little bit. I'm that guy. I read too long. I did that.
I think if it were a show and not a movie, you would have to move substantially beyond the first thought stereotype, because you need enough material for several seasons, and there isn't just one poet stereotype or one.
Yeah.
You'd have to have richer characters, richer kinds of, and you wouldn't just have. You could have like, man, I saw some open mic comedy the other day. Wow, so great. It was brave.
Yeah, it's brave.
That's what I will say. It was brave.
So
how often do you do that? How often do you go out and get dressed and leave your house to go be brave and nothing else and not get paid for it?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Sometimes with comedy, you can get booed for it because the stakes are pretty intense sometimes because people are expecting to laugh.
Have you ever gotten booed as a poet?
What's that?
Have you ever gotten booed as a poet?
No, but you feel the boo sometimes, or they're like, like, okay, that didn't land.
Yep.
And
feel the boo.
I
like that a lot. Yeah. So I should probably cut this part out of the video and not show it so you can make that TV show a lot of money. Is what I think. Open mic. It's like Friends, but with an open mic.
With an open mic. Yeah, and you have to go beyond the stereotype. They start getting richer and deeper, and like, oh my God, these are people. This is important that they come together. It's not just that they get to read poems. It's that they're doing something communal together. In a world where that, especially these days, that's hard to come by.
Yeah. That's awesome. I think I can't wait to see it.
Let's
fall at NBC,
Let's script it out, that's how we're gonna.
So, do you have any ambitions or skill with screenwriting, that sort of a thing? Have you ever tried?
When I was in grad school, I did my at Emerson. Then you could like pick and choose from different genres. You didn't have to pick one. So I did a screenplay as my thesis.
Oh.
And I was about to go to LA to do my final semester there and intern with a film company. And my dad got sick, and I stayed in Boston. And then,
gosh, okay.
And then 9/11 happened, and like and that was, I had friends who were going into the film industry, and I'm like, I don't think that's my thing. And they loved it, but I'm like, I don't know if I like it the same way. I like watching it. I don't know if I like being if I want to be on the other side of it.
Right.
It's hard. It's really hard. It's decades.
I can only imagine. Yeah.
David Cross has that comedy bit about like you spend years and years in LA until finally you get a part, ironically playing yourself as the person who never made it in Hollywood on some street on some LA scene as the camera goes by wearing your rainbow suspenders going, they're gonna make it in Hollywood, and it's like and you gotta like Hollywood. So
that feels like the poem. That feels like the fighter poem, like the representation within a representation, like Russian nesting doll. God, that is brutal. So what I'm hearing is you have the chops to write open mic. So I think you should just do that. I should
just do it. Maybe that's the thing I got to do, because the poetry is dried up, it seems like. I feel like I emptied the tank on this book a lot.
It's dried up. You have 4 books. I don't believe you.
Maybe I just need a break or something. Yeah, but you were asking me other projects. I'm like, I don't know. Like I'm looking for inspiration. You got any ideas?
Well, now you got your screenplay, so maybe now you need a whole book of pop culture, Gen X, coming of age, my life in the movies type thing.
Actually, I have been starting to try to do something with that Wonder Woman poem.
Yeah.
And like I was like talking to someone like, maybe I should just do a book of going to the movies, not just the movies, but ekphrastic poems, sort of like Adam Vine's Out of Speech, where it's not just about the paintings, but the experience in those stories. My relationship, not just to the movies, but like that I've been going to opening days of movies since my dad took us to see Empire Strikes Back in 1980, and I take my kids. And there was one point where 25 of us in our family went to see Force Awakens on opening night.
25? That's awesome.
And when Han Solo died, like I could hear my children just bawling. And like this, and it's okay. This isn't just about the movies. This is about going this experience. Like when I took my daughter to see Wonder Woman 1984, and by renting a theater during COVID, so she could sit socially distanced with 6 friends.
You rented the theater for it?
Went to the theater for it.
That's amazing.
Well, it cost me about $200 to rent the theater because they would take anything, and she brought 5 friends, and the parents dropped them off with masks, socially distanced, but they get to be teenagers for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Able to do that. And when I gave her that gift as a Christmas present, I remember I was like, it's a card. Like this is something, and she just cried.
Oh.
She opened it up and she hugged me and said, "Thank you." Like I'm like, I didn't know it was gonna be that big a deal. And I'm crying and everyone's crying. I was like, stop it. And it was great. And then we get, and it wasn't a great movie.
I didn't want to say, it really had a lot of shortcomings. I felt feelings watching the first one. I didn't really realize how badly I wanted to see representations like that on film. Yeah. But you know what? You tapped into the experience. It didn't matter what the film was, right? It could have been the worst movie ever made, and that experience for her.
Yeah, it was a stone in the soup. It was like just getting people together, getting all the people together to have a time, to be a kid again, to be what we had like so easily. 15 years became like, so many kids got stuff robbed from them, being able to be a teenager. So it was fun, So it wasn't a great movie, but it was a great experience. And we got to talk about how it wasn't a great movie after. Like that was
It's almost, you almost have more to talk about when you kind of didn't like it.
She was great. She was like, how come in the first movie she helps end World War I, and then the next movie starts with her stopping a bank heist at a mall like Spider-Man? I'm like, I don't know, man.
It was an excellent question.
There was a little bit of a falling off there, I think.
God. Hey, why don't you read that one? Would you read that poem? We can end with that poem. It was published in the Night Hare and Barks, right?
Yeah.
I had it pulled up, and I think, wow, I'm gonna follow along. But you, yeah.
I don't know the printed version.
Excellent.
Yeah, this is an idea of like, oh, maybe I'll write a book like this, but I just don't know if I get the chops, or maybe you and I should just trade back and forth movie poems. Write a co-authored book.
Dream come true. Let's do it.
Like, that'd be kind of fun. Like you gotta respond to Wonder Woman. I respond to your next poem. We just go back.
There's some reason why this is the response. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe after.
We're committing this to video. It's as good as a contract. It's happening. It's good.
Okay, so I'll read this. Wonder Woman 84.
Yeah. Does this appear in any of your books?
No, this was new. This came out sort of in the winter, so this is what made me think, oh, maybe I should.
Oh yes, it was before your book. Yeah.
Philip Clark, who's one of the editors here, I was like, maybe I should write a book of these. He's like, yes, do it. I'm like, maybe.
See, then I just had the same idea he had.
Yeah.
This is a majority opinion. I will link to this on the site too, so folks can follow along.
The problem is when you stall out of 4 poems, you're like, okay. Now
see what I can do for you.
a sonic crown about my experience with the Smurfs.
You're pushing it. You're pushing it now.
Wonder Woman 84. Was there a better year than 84 to be a kid in love? The kind of movies that go deep into your skin. And not because they were good or bad or great, or that each shifted the world just a little or quite a lot, but the buzz of being young, of being honey heavy with young, and we the first and last mass of latchkey kids, Gen X slackers already, well, whatever, never mind about being forgotten because we had our movies. And we stood in lines that roped around a block to see a show on opening day. And I partied my 11th birthday at a second seeing of Ghostbusters with buddies, and Footloose we only went to because the movie we wanted to see was sold out, but Ren had us holding out for a hero like the kids in Red Dawn, which I know now is dressed in Reagan, but as boys we wanted to be tough. Still, I didn't miss, even at that age, the thin and bloody veil between terrorist and patriot. Then I talked my friends out of the teenage hit of Meatballs 2 to see Atreyu battle the nothing in a never-ending story. And I'll ever be that sad rock biter. Oh, they look like big, strong hands, don't they? And one summer night, my dad and I saw Daniel LaRusso take on Cobra Kai and Alley with an Eye. And the next night, brought my brothers and mother so they learned balance from Miyagi too. Splash? My brother's boss asked in 2009 when Paul quoted Hanks telling the cabbie to take him to Cape Cod, and Paul was so surprised that his boss didn't also have it memorized. And Gremlins, even though it takes place at Christmas, we saw in Salzburg while we were renting a summer cottage at Seabrook Beach. And remember, I drew Stripe as a drag when I got home. And I can't lie, Spinal Tap, 16 Candles, and Terminator trickled into our house from video views, and also Purple Rain, but my brother John had a bootleg of the soundtrack. And those aren't even the whole list. I mean, Toxic Avenger, Buckaroo Banzai, Starman, Chud, Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dwellers. In each one, its own story of seeing. So it's just going to the movies, which made it be for me even better than poetry. Just sharing the dark with your friends as heroes and villains, blaze of burn and celluloid, and sneakers step on sticky floors. So I love going. And now my daughter loves going, has always loved going to get lost in light. It's become the thing we do from watching WALL-E or wishing Thor had gone for the head. But this last year has been such a robbed year for the young. And there has been no going to the movies, no chance for her to be seriously silly with friends. And so a simple Christmas gift, she actually cried. For $200, food not included, I rented a theater just this afternoon. And I took her to see Wonder Woman 84. Her friends were dropped off by their parents so they could sit 6 feet apart in masks. And they laughed and got lost in story, less for the story, which wasn't actually all that good. Come on, Patty. But for the gathering for a story, where no one is lost inside a glass or behind a mask, all the world a hairspray neon glow.
Oh,
I got a long one. Sorry.
I love it. Do not apologize. That was so amazing. That is one of the most evocative movie poems I think I've ever read. I mean, it makes me think too about how David Chang, the celebrity kind of chef, has this theory of deliciousness about how when you're making food, it's not about making something that tastes exactly like something you used to eat as a kid, but like evoking something that evokes a memory in you, not trying to like replicate something, but trying to tap you into your own memories, which seems really generous to me. And I feel like this poem does that. I mean, even if you've not seen all of these movies, like you said, it's not the movie, it's the experience. And like having them all listed and the joy that you have and listing them and talking about the shared dark, it really just evokes my own sort of sense of being in the dark and the movies that I love. And I think that's just so wonderful, so beautiful. That's fantastic.
It's a great reference about like to evoke the how you remember the food, not the food as it necessarily was.
Yeah, and it can be, it's like when they say that wine smells like leather. There's no leather in it. It's just that it's putting you in mind of leather. I think poetry does that so often, and so successful poetry does, and really well done poetry like yours.
You might remember the band Sha Na Na. They played at Woodstock. They would cover 50 songs, and we don't play 50 songs the way they were played. We play them the way you remember them being played, like sped up, faster, a little more pulse. And people are like, "Oh my God, it's like nostalgia," but it's like, yeah, but it's not. But it's not the same as it was. It's what you wanted it to be, in some ways, or what you remembered it being. So it's the same.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. Thank you so much for reading that and for reading all of your fantastic poems. I'm going to put a ton of cool links in the article for folks who want to learn more about your work. And stay tuned for your upcoming projects and spec scripts and all of that stuff that you'll end up working on. Thank you so much for spending some time talking to me and letting me pick your brain about pop culture and going to the movies.
Thank you, Caitlin, so much. It was a lot of fun.